Hello, it's 21st of August 2018 and this is episode 76 of Scavenger's Hoard, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kirsty.
We're here to deliver a regular rundown of Star Wars news, analysis and commentary, with a focus on the sequel trilogy and the future of the saga. I'm not going to go into the whole "how has your week in Star Wars been" thing, just because it's more important to say that this is the first episode we're recording now that Kirsty is back on United States soil. Weird.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Back home. I'm going home both ways, so that's how it feels.
Yeah, you have homes on both sides of the ocean, which is nice.
I'm very lucky.
No, and this, hopefully, should mean that we're going to go back to a more regular schedule of programming. Because, oddly, when we're further apart, it's actually easier to record. I know that will sound strange, but I think it's just about being in a particular routine, and over the summer we're on holiday and we're seeing people all year round, but it's just easier, I think, when it's not summer halls.
Yeah, when you're at home, it's just easy to be like, right, it's going to be Saturday mornings or evenings for you or whatever. So
yeah, exactly, and we make it happen. So just before we get into the news section proper, we wanted to give a bit of breaking news. And do you have the story there, Kirsty, about Richard E. Grant and a character who he is not playing?
Yeah, so this is from the Radio Times. It says, the Radio Times reports that Richard E. Grant is not playing Star Wars villain Grand Admiral Thrawn. So I think he was asked about this specifically because that's been like the main point of speculation about his role. Obviously it wasn't something that we subscribe to, although, we're still kind of undecided on whether he'll be a villain in general, because that's the kind of role that he's known for. But
yes.
Yeah, someone mentioned the theory to him and he said, "I'm not playing the Star Wars character you just mentioned. I'm not allowed to tell you anything. Otherwise, I would be fired. It's a complete lockdown on any information whatsoever." So he can, he can kill that particular theory, but he can't really say anything else. But that's enough for me for now.
Yeah, no, that is really good news to me. Like I say, I didn't realistically think it was going to be Thrawn, but I always wanted Richard E. Grant to be playing a new character. Because, I don't know, I think that when you're playing a pre-existing character, there's just all these expectations and these preset character traits that you have to adhere to. Mm-hmm. And I find that less exciting than when you're just playing a completely new role and you can make it your own and really define it.
Yeah, and I'm sure others feel differently. And I know a lot of people did want him to be Thrawn. But I just think it would look kind of goofy. To go from animation to live action. I'm just not sure how that would work. I'm sure, the makeup artists and everyone would do the best job that they could, but to me, I'm not sure I'd be able to take it seriously.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's like Ahsoka. I think that was a great character design, and I think she looks really cool in the Clone Wars and Rebels, but I just don't see how that would translate to a live action film. I think there are just certain designs where they just seem too firmly rooted in this very stylized, like, animated world, and I think it'd be very difficult to realise them properly.
Also, wouldn't Thrawn be really old by the time episode 9, it was in the timeline? I mean, I guess we don't know the average lifespan of Chiss, but he'd be, like, well into his 80s, surely.
Yeah, isn't he meant to be, like, middle-aged around the time of Rebels?
Yeah, he's an adult in the Clone Wars,
Wow, yeah, so I'd guess, like, an optimistic estimate of his age would be, like, 95 or something. You've got to be measuring it in relation to, like, Ezra, and Ezra's about the same age as Luke, and Luke is, 60 or late 50s in Last Jedi?
Yeah.
And then I'd assume there are at least 30 years between Ezra and Thrawn, at least. And so, yeah, he's pushing 90, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's a contemporary of Anakin in that new book that just came out, right? So, I don't know. It could have happened, but I don't know. I would assume that they're, like, on a level with the average human lifespan, but I don't think there's anything in canon yet to actually confirm that, so either way, we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. He's not Thrawn.
He's not Thrawn. Thank the maker. Sorry, Thrawn fans. Oh, you know what? Like, I'm sure there are Thrawn fans out there who didn't want him to be Thrawn anyway, because, just kind of shoehorning him into the sequel trilogy doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel like he's rooted in an earlier part of the timeline.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it makes sense for him to be where he is rather than just being moved up so much to go right into the events of the present day.
Mm-hmm. So that's the episode 9 news that we have for the week. Slim pickings.
Isn't it lovely that episode 9 news is news about things that are not happening?
Exactly. We're slowly ticking off the things that are just not going to be part of that story, rather than the things that are.
It reminds me of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they show like a slideshow of the knights, and one of them is Sir not appearing in this film. It's just like that.
Yeah. But other than that, Richard E. Grant has been really sweet so far in terms of how, excited he seems to be part of this world. He's recorded little videos and posted them on Twitter about how he couldn't believe it, being brought into this audition and talking to Nina Gold about it and it being the opportunity of a lifetime. And obviously he was a fan of it growing up, so it's just really cool.
Yeah. I saw one of the videos of him and he literally looked like a kid on Christmas morning. It was lovely. He was so happy. Right, to move on, we are going to talk quickly about the Resistance teaser. Yeah, would you like to talk through this, Kirsty, because you wrote the notes?
Sure. So, well, our notes, it's like first impressions. Which, to me, I was, I was impressed. My first impression was that I was impressed. I really like the look of this show. Obviously, the teaser doesn't give too much away, but it kind of sets up a little premise that Kaz is being drafted into the Resistance and given this secret mission as a spy, but also has this team where he's doing more official work. And it looks like he has this cute little dynamic with Poe, who is voiced by Oscar. That was very recognisable.
Yes.
That's really cool to see. And I just really liked this animation style. It just appeals to me more than the Rebels and Clone Wars style. I know that won't be true for everyone, and I've already seen some criticism out there. But I've been watching the animated series Voltron recently, and it just kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I liked the animation style as well, to be honest. I was a bit surprised. It was different from what I was expecting. So I knew they were going to go for a more 2D cel-shaded animation look. But I didn't realise quite how wildly different it would look from, say, Rebels and Clone Wars. But I think that's quite welcome, to be honest. It's nice to mix it up. And yeah, there's something very appealing about how bright it looks and about how clearly delineated all the shapes and environments are. I do think like the ships look better than the people so far. But I think it will probably grow on me as I actually watch the episodes, because yes, I do plan to watch Resistance, believe it or not. I think it will grow on me as I get used to the characters and I start rooting for them and following their adventures, it will become natural.
Yeah, and the animation style will evolve too. Like, it will improve over time. That's kind of the nature of these. I'm not an animation expert, but I've seen a lot of people giving their impressions on Twitter, and I'm not really sure what to think either way, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's more about the story for me, and I think it looks really cute. And yes, it does look like it's more for children than adults, but again, this is Star Wars, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's amazing how some responses are like, these people really don't understand that this is for children, do they?
Yeah, it's on the Disney Channel.
I've seen some people say that, if it was for kids, why would it be on at 10 p.m? And it's like, do you really think that modern kids are going to watch these shows when they go out on their scheduled time? They are going to be watching them on catch-up services.
Yeah, that's not how anyone watches TV these days.
Yeah, exactly. The only people who will be watching it when it goes out are the super hardcore Star Wars fans, who can just be relied on to watch whatever they put out with Star Wars on it. So that's why it's in that time slot, because they know they will at least have an audience for it as it goes out, even if that audience is small. The actual kid demographic that is aimed at, they will watch it the next morning.
Yeah, and they'll probably...
That's just going to be how it works.
They probably will be showing it several times a day, too. I think they did the same with Rebels. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's just how these things work.
It's really not a deal breaker. So, yeah, whatever. Some people are just... determined to be negative about everything, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited for it. It starts in October, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so it'll be really cool, and it'll be very nice to have some new Star Wars content to discuss again. And I saw you've mentioned here, Kirsty, that the show will feature Leia.
Yes, so she wasn't in the teaser. We got glimpses of a lot of the new characters, aside from Poe and Phasma, obviously. But Anthony Bresnikan at EW confirmed that Leia will be in the show, voiced by Rachel Butera. So that's really exciting.
That is really nice. Is there any word on whether Hux will be in it?
Not officially yet, but I have my suspicions that Hux and Kylo will show up eventually.
Yeah, I can see them doing that as some kind of like season cliffhanger to get people excited, especially with Kylo.
Yeah, I mean we'll see, but that's the kind of thing that they're not going to announce, right? So,
yeah,
but yeah, Hux even more so, to be honest, because you can imagine a funny dynamic like going out between him and Phasma. Or like as Kaz is doing his secret missions, you know, if he's infiltrating the First Order at some level, like there has to be a danger presented, right? So
yeah, they could do like a secret mission where he has to infiltrate the First Order officers' quarters, and he passes like Hux's room, but like Hux is doing his aerobics workout, and it would be hilarious.
Oh, you mean the Lego one?
Yes, of course.
Not sure how canon that is, but they could bring it in via Resistance.
What do you mean, Kirsty? It's like 100% canon? It's like A-class canon?
Definitely. Him in his pink workout outfit. Absolutely. Chilling with an ice cream afterwards.
Yeah, listening to Taylor Swift.
I also wanted to note how amazing everyone's hair looks in this teaser.
Yes! That's such a good point.
Yeah, as we know that Star Wars is about hair.
Yeah, I think especially the sequel trilogy, to be honest. I think hair has become a more prominent theme.
Maybe. I just think everyone, especially the Skywalker's hair, let's be honest, like Skywalker Solos and Padme.
Oh yeah, that's true. Padme had beautiful hair.
And Anakin, come on.
Yeah. Anakin's is fine.
What?
It did look a little bit ratty to me sometimes.
In Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah,
oh my God.
a little. Like, sorry, am I speaking sacrilege?
To me, yes. I will let it go.
It must be treason then.
We can all have different hair opinions.
I thank you for your boundless mercy.
But yeah, everyone looks
goodness.
amazing. I really love these character designs. So
yeah, they do. The character designs are really nice. Like, I think when I first saw Kaz, I was afraid that he was just going to be Ezra 2.0.
No.
Now I've seen him in motion. He definitely seems quite distinct.
Yeah, that's the
and very
thing.
much his own type of thing.
I kind of wish we hadn't got that leaked blurry picture, because that's what everyone was thinking, right? Oh, it just kind of looks like Ezra, but it was too far away to tell. And then I wish this had been our first impression. So
yeah,
that's a little lesson for me not to always look at leaks.
Yeah, exactly. They don't always bring good things. Right, then the next thing that we want to talk about quickly is that Kelly Marie Tran has done an op-ed piece for the New York Times. It's titled, "I Won't Be Marginalised by Online Harassment." I'm not going to read it out in full here because like the whole article is just so eloquent, and yeah, so please just go and read it. I'll include a link to it in the show notes, so then there is no excuse. But it's just really beautifully written and powerful, and yeah, it really hits home. And it's basically like a really like cathartic piece of writing, it feels like, because yeah, it really goes into the state of mind that all those awful comments on her Instagram put her in, and it makes it crystal clear why she left social media. Because there were some people doubting it and suggesting that she may have had other reasons beyond fan harassment, but this makes it 100% clear that it was all about that racism and that those cruel comments people were leaving.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this was put out, and like you say, I think there were a lot of people who were well-meaning, even not everyone, but some people were well-meaning in saying, oh, maybe that wasn't why she left, like maybe trying to give fandom the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Maybe these people weren't following Kelly and weren't kind of seeing these comments constantly, but it really was under every single thing she posted. Really disgusting comments that I wouldn't want to repeat.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that she took the time to put this out. It wasn't like this quick reaction, just to kind of... It seems like this is something that she's wanting to put out as a result of her own journey, as opposed to just like trying to appease the the fans or something. It's like for herself and for the women of colour who look up to her in fandom as well, because I've seen so many people saying this has made them extremely emotional, you know, this hits home for them. This idea of internalizing what a white supremacist racist society tells you about your looks and what you have to offer a world. And the fact that she says, like, I started to internalize that feeling of shame, and that was why I left. And she deserves to feel beautiful. She is beautiful, and she's so much more. And I'm really glad that she was able to put this out.
Yeah, and I think what really moves me about this is how defiant it is, and how it's all about, no, you're not going to silence me, and no, you're not going to make me feel this way. I'm not going to let you. Like, I find that so, like, powerful. Like, it's not coming out just, like, saying, this is how terrible this made me feel. It's also about saying, this is the shittiness I've been through, and then this is the world I want. This is the good thing that I want to aspire towards and want to work towards. Because, yeah, like, she ends with, I'm just getting started, and I can't wait to see what Kelly does next. Because, yeah, like, her Instagram posts, when she was on Instagram, she was posting such awesome things. She was posting lots of, like, great things about, like, self-love and like embracing yourself, and, like, you know, like, no makeup posts and stuff, like, and about, like, stressing how silly some of those social media shenanigans are, because of course when people do no makeup selfies on Instagram, often they're anything but, and they're carefully made up, and it must take hours to put it all on. And she was completely honest and upfront about all those things, and I really missed that when she left Instagram. And so it's really nice to see that, yeah, Kelly hasn't really gone anywhere. She needed time to think about things, and presumably to craft this and really process all those feelings and think about what she wanted to say. But yeah, I'm so happy to hear her voice again.
Me too. And I don't know whether she would ever return to social media or not. Like, I wouldn't blame her if she didn't. But you're right that it is it's a loss for us as fans that she decided to leave, because these people pushed her away. But her health takes priority. Like, it does. Absolutely, yeah. But it was a loss because her posts were so uplifting and inspirational, and she was honest. So yeah, like you, I am excited to see what she does next. I don't know if you've seen EW recently posted some photos with her and Elizabeth Olsen. They're in that new series, Sorry for Your Loss.
Yes, I saw them briefly. Yeah. And I really obviously I love Kelly, and I also love Elizabeth Olsen. Yeah. I saw her recently she was in Ingrid Goes West, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, amazing in that. So yeah, like, I need to check that show out. I'm not sure how, when, if it's airing in the UK,
I think
but I'll try and find it
on Facebook. I'm not really sure how that works.
Really?
Yeah, but that's what I saw in that article.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very intriguing.
Yeah. And obviously we don't have any details yet on Kelly in episode 9, but we know she's going to be in it, and I really, really hope fandom turns out in support. Because I'm so tired of seeing people posting support of her, but then with the caveat that, oh yeah, well, I hated Rose. It's like, I'm sorry, but we just don't care. That's so beside the point.
Yes.
And
it's like, it's not the time or the place.
Yeah, read
it's
the room,
like,
please.
Why are you doing that? It's like, God.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I don't understand why people didn't like Rose, but I do understand, and I do think a lot of it is rooted in racism, or at least people's stereotypical perceptions of what a character like Rose, played by Kelly, should have been.
Yeah.
Because we're going to go into it later, but in The Director and the Jedi, Ryan, he talks about how when he was writing Rose, he wrote her as someone who you wouldn't expect to see in a Star Wars movie, and he wanted someone like Kelly to play her. So I think all of that is wrapped up, and people get that there is this conflation, because what she brought to the story wasn't really what people might have expected.
Yes.
So it can have racist undertones and sexist undertones, whether people realise that or not.
Yeah. No, so for a lot of people, like you say, I don't even think it's particularly, like, conscious, which is why I think stuff like this piece from Kelly is so important, because she, like, talks about examples of how other people have made her feel so othered and so different just because of how she looks, and the way she puts it, it's clear that those people were presumably talking from a place of complete ignorance, but that doesn't make it okay. And there kind of needs to be this responsibility people take on for themselves to like learn and try and be more sensitive and more like open in terms of the way they interact with the world and interact with other people.
Yeah, I hope that this, like reading this, maybe makes some people realise. It won't make everyone realise, because who are we kidding? This is the internet and people can be awful.
Yeah.
Because people can be awful in real life and the internet is real life. But
Yeah.
people hide behind those avatars and think that they can say whatever they like with no consequence. And real people are more important than your perception of a movie or a character.
Yeah.
So I hope
definitely.
people can realise that.
Yeah. No, so it's a very powerful piece, and again, I'll link to it in the show notes, so please do go and read it. Right, with that all covered, I think it's time to move into our spotlight, which is a listener's choice, because it was voted on by our dear listeners. So, yeah, if you do not follow us on Twitter, that is the place to be, because Kirsty put up a poll, and a discussion of the Director and the Jedi was the clear winner for the topic people wanted us to cover next.
We did get comments from people saying, I hope that you'll discuss the other ones, and we probably will get to them in time. It's just we wanted to do a fun thing where people chose the next episode.
Yeah, exactly. Power to the people and all that. Yeah, no, so we have both rewatched this documentary in preparation for this. And yeah, I found it delightful. It was so nice to watch it again. I doubt we're going to cover this in the actual proper in-depth discussion of the documentary, so I just wanted to mention it now. But I love seeing drunk Kathleen Kennedy at the start of the documentary.
It's amazing. She's I feel like she's slightly sauced, yeah. And
yeah, it's so great.
It's a celebration. They're at a rap party, so, you know, makes sense. No judgment.
Yeah, she's literally like, yeah, Ryan, I love you, Ryan, man. You're the best director I've ever worked with. Yeah. Obviously, it's not quite that, but it's just amazing, and I love it. Awesome. It's like, you go, girl, you go.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling of relief they must get to at the end of a production like that is like, oh my God, let's celebrate.
Yeah.
So.
And my other favourite Kathleen Kennedy moment is where they're like filming Ryan and co like in a meeting, and then Kathleen Kennedy just like knocks on the doors and it's like, hey guys, well, I wondered if you wanted to see the posters, and then she sees the people filming the documentary and she's like, oh, you.
Yeah, she doesn't realise they're there at first, and she has a cute little smile.
Yeah, so amazing. Like, it was so good. But yeah, I think we have split this into a series of themes, because that is probably the best place to approach this from, rather than just going like Kathleen Kennedy came to the door and she had this funny smile on her face. So we're going to approach this in a somewhat more serious and grown-up way, while still being fun, hopefully, because that's what we always endeavour towards. Yeah, and the first big theme we were going to talk about was how the documentary really concentrates on that relationship between Mark and Ryan, and really explores like the reasons that Ryan had for portraying Luke's journey in the way that he did, and the reservations Mark had about Ryan's choices. And yeah, it's all really interesting stuff. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Kirsty?
Yeah. Just before I get started on that, like, I totally agree with you. I think that this documentary is amazing and really rewatchable. Like, I feel like I've watched it 5 or 6 times at this point, and I still feel like I'm getting something out of it every time. It's so rich. There's so much going on, and kind of because of that, I think we might have a hard time talking about it, or at least making sure that we refer to everything we want to refer to. I'm sure I'll get to the end and wish that I'd mentioned something or other, because there are so many cute little details and interactions between the cast and crew that are just like, oh, that's just really sweet to see. And it really enriches your understanding of the movie, and I feel like that's probably important for a lot of people. I know that Luke's role in the movie has been controversial, and obviously it was controversial to Mark as well, so that's kind of the premise of the central dynamic of the documentary. Like you say, it's the director and the Jedi, so it kind of charts Mark's evolution in terms of understanding what Ryan was going for, Ryan trying to put that forward, but not being too prescriptive, because he seems to understand where Mark's coming from, and by proxy he understands why some fans wouldn't love the idea too of Luke first being reluctant to take the saber back and throwing it away, and and then being reluctant to train Rey and kind of giving up on the world and kind of being coded in this depressing way, right? That he's given up. He doesn't think that he has anything to offer anymore. And then the arc of coming back and actually sacrificing himself and dying, which Ryan explicitly says he thinks that Mark wasn't happy about that. He didn't want Luke to die. So there's a lot going on there, and it really paints this rich picture of, it's quite complicated because Mark can say, I fundamentally disagreed with everything he conceived of for this character, but then he also turns around and says, you know, now having said that, I'll do everything in my power to realize your vision, because it's not my character to decide, it belongs to other people, they just rent it out to me. So I really appreciate that, because it's honest in its portrayal of that complexity, that he can say, look, I disagree, this wasn't really where I pictured my character 30 years later, but you're the creator and I respect that, and I'm gonna do my best to uphold what you're writing for him. And he gave this amazing performance.
Yeah, I really appreciated that as well. And I also liked that they avoided doing a thing where they kind of had it as like a turnaround story, you know, so that, well, maybe Mark started out like fundamentally disagreeing with Ryan and disliking his ideas, but then he came around and he absolutely loved it, and he was like fully on board and he loved his ideas, you know. So I don't think it was presented in that way, because while it did ultimately show Mark being supportive of Ryan and wanting to do whatever he could to fulfill Ryan's vision and respect that that was the direction he'd chosen for the story, I don't think Mark ever really goes like 180 on the position he started out from.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
No, definitely, because there's been a lot of this idea in fandom, and I think Mark Hamill's had to address it himself on social media to be like, hey, no one's making me say any of these things. If I you know, say my position did soften even though I didn't fully align with it, that's not him with a gun to his head from Disney. The mouse isn't making him say those things. It's that he did change his mind to an extent, but yeah, it wasn't this like fairy tale thing where he turned around and goes, oh, you know what, this is what I think, because he's allowed to have his own opinion, because at the end of the day they're just doing a job. Like the character does mean a lot to him, and he knows how much it means to the audience. But I think also Mark's heard a lot from fans who say that Luke's arc in The Last Jedi actually means a great deal to them.
Yeah.
So you're never going to please everyone, and I think they all just recognise that, and they're adults about it, and respect what Ryan was trying to say, because you really get this impression throughout the documentary, and I think Carrie summed it up quite well as well when she's talking about him, that he's not... I think she says, like, she starts out by saying that he's an asshole.
Yes, that was amazing. That was one of the best parts.
That he has a strong vision, but he doesn't come across like strong in like, oh no, you will do it this way. He works with them and he's collaborative, but at the end of the day, he wrote the story because he had something to say.
Yeah, of course.
So it's finding that balance, and I think it does it really well.
Yeah, no, it was very effectively done. There were some really like great moments in the documentary, really illustrating like how far Mark went in terms of the emotional investment he gave to the portrayal of Luke in the movie. Like, I think everyone who's seen it will know what we're talking about with this, but it's particularly the behind the scenes where they're showing Mark filming the destruction of the temple, and they have him just like folding over with like R2 next to him, and how like he just remains folded over even after they've called cut, and Ryan goes over to try and comfort him, and Marcus still doesn't really like respond or move. He's just like so in that headspace that he just isn't coming out of it, you know. And that felt so intense, and it's like, wow, he really did deliver on what he said he was going to.
Yeah, when they're showing that moment being filmed, Mark's talking over the top of it, and he says, my character always represented hope and optimism, and now here I am, very pessimistic, disillusioned, and sort of demoralized. Which is right, but 30 years had passed. So it's kind of like him coming to recognise that, and almost going through the same arc that Luke does. That I think Ram says it like at a different point. He says he's not the Luke Skywalker of this trilogy. He's the Obi. So it's kind of just coming to terms with that, because the documentary, and obviously it's just recording what the people themselves are saying. So at the beginning, Ryan positions himself and Ram as the clear newbies, like they're the outsiders to Lucasfilm, to Star Wars. They're new, they're fans, but they weren't veterans within this franchise. And he says, I imagine that Ram and I would be outsiders, that we would be somehow infiltrating this world that we don't belong in. And he identifies as a fan, saying, the only thing I'd want is a really good movie that delights me in ways I didn't expect. And kind of contrasting with that, you get these clips of Mark walking around set, like saying hello to the cast and crew, like looking very comfortable and excited to be back, and joking around like, oh yes, you might recognize me, I'm tangentially related to this production. And so he's Luke Skywalker, like the Luke Skywalker. So it kind of sets up this really interesting narrative between the two, that you kind of got this old and the new, which obviously The Last Jedi does itself to an extent.
Yeah, so I found that with Mark and also Carrie, to be honest, they have this, like obviously had in poor Carrie's case, they have this kind of persona where it's sort of split of necessity, I think, and I'm sure this is probably the case for many, many famous people. But I think there's Mark Hamill, the really like charismatic, fun, buoyant guy who is just really sunny and optimistic and positive about everything. But then you also have a much more like introspective Mark Hamill, who probably can really relate quite intensely with all those dilemmas that Luke has been going through, to be honest. Like the disillusionment and the sense of things not panning out as you hoped they would. And yeah, like all those like feelings that I guess middle age brings, you know, just like the real realities of life and things going horribly wrong, like hitting you. And I think that will take you to like a very dark place if you really commit to that. And I think that's why you see that contrast between that bubbly Mark, who's all like positive and bright and smiley with the crew, and then the Mark who's just all doubled over as he's in character as Luke filming a scene, because he really kept to his word and did give it everything, and is probably able to draw upon some of the like most dark, rawest aspects of himself to channel into that performance. So like, I know this is a slight tangent, but just to mention it, I was reading an interview with Carrie as part of my research for my other project that shall not be named, and they were like interviewing her, and one moment she was all like sunny and bright about how she was like this action figure and how she was on all this merchandise, and just talking about how crazy and wild it is that there's all this stuff of her likeness. And then the guy doing the interview asked her, how does that make you feel? And in the interview is written, the colour drained from her face, and then hopeless. And that was her response. I know that got very dark.
Yeah,
but
I think it's honestly like amazing that they even show these moments of honesty to us, because we don't deserve them as fans. We don't deserve to see them as real people, like behind whatever they decide to show us. That's private, and if they want to share it with us, it paints this more complicated picture. And I think they're honestly quite brave for sharing it, because people can be like, oh well, you should feel grateful because this gave you your career, and you know you've built a livelihood off it, and you have lots of money now and everything, and of course everyone would envy you to be someone with action figures of your own likeness and stuff like that. So I think it's hard for people to understand that there can be quite complicated, seemingly contradictory feelings about it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you get a lot of like, well, if Mark Hamill was so unhappy with it, why did he come back? And why would he be in episode 9? And it's like, he can feel more than one way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, people are complicated, guys.
Yeah, and I think that's what this documentary does really well. It shows both sides to it. And you get that with Ryan too, because you get these moments where he's talking with Ram, and obviously they know that they're mic'd up, so it's not like you're really infringing on a private conversation, but they're still having these moments of honesty, and he's saying, I'm not sure this sequence works, I think I'm going to have to rewrite it doesn't really make sense. Or, you know, he says to the camera, like, I'm not sure this thing's going to work out, not sure we can stick to the schedule and things like that. And they do work out because we saw the finished product and he made changes where he obviously saw fit. But you get that kind of contrasted with a lot of the cast and crew talking about how, like I said, how strong his vision is, how much he knows what he wants and he's going for it, and how even though it's this group collaborative effort, because you see all of these people from the various departments talking to him and working on things and daring to share their opinion, it's ultimately like it's both, you know, that he can have these moments of doubt and still know what he wants.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And yeah, that's a good point actually about how the documentary shows all these facets of the people involved that could be seen as contradictory somehow, but it just shows that they're part of what make a whole person. Like, it's natural to have doubts and to question yourself even as you're very confident about what you're doing. And in a way, it would be much more worrying if you didn't have doubts. You know, like if you were so confident in your vision that it was flawless and immutable and not to be changed. Because there's a difference between having a strong vision and having a rigid vision that won't change. Because, yeah, the latter is not good.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about it is that Ryan, he explains what he was doing, but he doesn't over-explain it. Like, especially with Luke, because he has to address what Mark and fans, presumably, even though he doesn't know at that point what the reaction is going to be. He says, in my mind, Luke's big thing in this movie is taking on that mantle of a symbol of hope and inspiring a whole new generation. He genuinely believes the light needs to find another hero. I wanted Luke's death to be on Luke's terms. I wanted it to be peaceful, to feel like a victory. So he sets it out, and that's obviously evident in the story itself. But he doesn't really feel the need to justify it over and over again. And I know that he's been asked about it in interviews since the movie came out, but it's not, I don't know, it's just something like you should be able to tell what he wanted from the story itself and why he wanted to do that. And at a certain point, if someone doesn't understand that or doesn't agree with it, there's not much more he can say to change their mind. He can just put forward what he believed in. And it's something that resonated with us and we liked it, and it was kind of in line with what we'd anticipated from the movie. But at the end of the day, he stands by it. And I think he said in interviews, the things that are heavily criticised the most are the things that I'm actually most proud of. And I think that's got to include Luke's story. So
yeah, no, that's definitely true. Like, I don't mean this to sound like a boast at all, but I go to quite a few directors' Q&As. And a pattern I've noticed coming out of those Q&As is that a lot of directors absolutely hate having to talk about what they intended by things and the meaning that people are meant to take away from their films, especially like integral parts, you know, like endings and stuff. I've got into trouble at Q&As before for asking about an ending. And I imagine that Ryan, even though he's given quite a lot here, to be honest, in terms of his intentions for particular scenes and his thought process and what he was trying to convey, I think Ryan would probably also be of the opinion that it's most important what you get out of it, and that even if that isn't necessarily a positive impression, like, I'm still happy that I was able to make you feel something, and I'm still happy that I was able to provoke such a strong response. I think he would prefer for people to be made happy by it and delighted by it and left with the sense of hope that he intended. But I think the main point of any of this is just to provoke people and to engage people and to get them thinking. And that's absolutely what he did do, especially with all the Luke stuff, because, yeah, it's proven so controversial and such a hot button topic.
Yeah, and I think the reality as well is that even with a documentary like this, there's so much left unsaid in terms of, hey, this is just the second chapter. There's one more to follow, at least. So, you know, they're talking about how this is the end for Luke and how he wanted that beautiful ending for Luke on his terms. But obviously at this point, we already know that Luke is returning in episode 9. So it's not the end, it's just an end that Ryan wanted for this particular chapter. And it rounds things off beautifully so that it doesn't end on such a cliffhanger, at least in not every single way. There's like a resolution, but you also know that there's unfinished business because he says, "See you around, kid," right? So it's finding that balance again.
Yeah, definitely. I also liked the stuff that the documentary offered in terms of the Rey and Luke dynamic. I thought that was really interesting, and again it showed that generational struggle quite well, because obviously that's text in the film, like that just comes through in that you see these contrasting perspectives, because Rey is now the youthful, optimistic one. She's the one who's full of hope and belief in this legend that Luke is basically given up on, whereas Luke is weary and disillusioned. Again, tying back to that whole idea that Luke is now the Obi-Wan of this story, and Rey is like the Luke figure. And yeah, I found the quote where Ryan describes like that relationship and like how that functions quite interesting, so I'll read. Rey shows up to the island with a set of expectations, saying, I need someone to show me my place in all this, and that's what she's trying to find, and she doesn't know what that's going to be yet. So Luke slamming the door in the face seemed like the most obvious thing in the world to throw a bucket of cold water on her head. There are folks in your life that you expect to fulfill a certain thing, and as we grow up, we realise that doesn't always happen. Yeah, because reading that, and obviously watching it in the documentary, it kind of reminded me of how much the whole Rey and Luke thing is a bit like when you grow up and you realise your parents aren't these like infallible godlike beings for the first time.
Yeah.
Because when you're a small child, you trust in your parents quite absolutely. You know, you think that they know everything, you think that they're like going to be reliable and that they're going to just solve everything. But then it reaches a certain point in your life, whether it's earlier in your childhood or in your teens or whatever, when the reality of that comes crashing down, and you're like, holy shit, these are flawed people, and they often don't know what they're doing. And I think that's the journey Rey goes through in this, which is why it's such a classic adolescent journey, albeit on a very heightened scale. So obviously we were talking in space with like monsters and laser swords and all those wonderful things that Star Wars brings. But yeah, I found that really effective, and I think everyone can relate to that when you view it through that lens. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I appreciate Ryan talking about that in the documentary as well, because so much of what all this discussion around Luke's arc in The Last Jedi, which I appreciate that people need, especially people who consider themselves primarily fans of Luke and of the original trilogy, so much of what's missing is the understanding of why he had to be that way in Rey's story.
Yes.
You know, like you see a lot of it, there's talk about Luke's story and all the emphasis on him, and it's like, well, the reason that we were able to anticipate where that was going was because we were looking at it through the lens of Rey's heroine journey and what Luke's role would have to be in that. You know, he's the powerless father, that mentor figure that's going to fail her. So, yeah, and how that fits in with Rey's expectations for Kylo as well. So I appreciate Ryan bringing that up, because even though this is called The Director and the Jedi, so much there is about how Luke matters to Rey and what his arc is able to do for her arc, which seems to be missing from a lot of the fandom discourse, I find. Because obviously Luke lets her down, and then she goes to Kylo and he lets her down, so then she's like, okay, I need to do things for myself, and that's her arc, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah. And it's also very new to Star Wars, which I appreciated, because you do obviously get that sense to some degree of being let down by past generations, but it's never in the same way. Because when Luke went to Vader in Empire Strikes Back, he wasn't expecting to find like a mentor who would like teach him things. He was expecting to find a villain who would like strike him down and kill his friends if he didn't fight him. So while it was obviously crushing and devastating to hear, "No, I am your father," that's not the same as Rey being disillusioned by Luke, because that's coming from it really from the opposite perspective, because Luke went in with the worst expectations, and then he found out something that muddied that understanding, whereas Rey went in with the best of expectations, expecting Luke to be this like golden hero, and then she gradually became more and more disillusioned until she realised she had to go in a different direction and look for something else. And that's just such a new type of narrative for Star Wars, and I loved it and found it so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the inclusion of the line when they're shown in the editing room after they've filmed that fight sequence, you get them like taking the footage back up to Pinewood, and Ryan's talking about how he needs to edit as they're going along, which is pretty new for him, but they're on a time crunch. So they're going over that footage that they filmed for the fight scene, and there's a cut line from Luke that's, "You opened yourself to the dark side for a pair of pretty eyes," which, you know, they've obviously cut because, well, from my perspective, it's probably just too much on the nose in terms of solidifying what that dynamic is supposed to be. It's very Papa Don't Preach.
Yes.
But maybe that's what some people needed, I don't know. But it's not in the film. But I appreciate them putting it in here because, you know, as part of the editing, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too there. You can say, like, this was there in the script, but then as we were editing it, we decided we didn't need it.
No, definitely. Yeah, so I think we should probably come to the end of the discussion of the Ryan and Mark stuff, because I think we've talked plenty about that now. I think just to close off, I'd say that I definitely feel like this documentary was kind of intended as a sort of therapy session for people who they knew were going to have serious problems with Luke's depiction in the movie. Because if I have any criticism of the documentary at all, it's that it focused so much on Mark and Luke and all those aspects of character and theme and everything that it didn't really go into the other characters at all. There was obviously some acknowledgement of them, but they weren't explored in any depth. And because I really love all the new characters that came with the sequel trilogy, I did miss out on that a bit, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, you get a decent amount of Rey, because obviously Rey and Luke have a very important dynamic, and that's crucial for Luke's arc, but you miss out on a lot. Like, there's very little of Finn and Rose, of Poe. You don't really get Oscar speaking. I think there's one instance of him talking with Ryan, and it's more about how Ryan's feeling about the story.
Yeah,
I think John is probably the only younger actor who is like interviewed for the documentary, it seems like, because you actually see him talking to the camera while he's sat down. You don't really get that with any of the other characters. I don't think we hear Adam speak.
You definitely don't hear Adam speak. You do hear Daisy speak.
Yeah.
She's interviewed on camera for it.
Well,
but not much, just a little.
Yeah, a lot of it just seems to be like, as they're on set, she's talking. But John, when you see him, like, he's in his own clothes and just looks a bit more casual. And I kind of hoped for more of that from all of them. And we don't really get anything from Kelly either, so...
Yeah, what I really hope is that by the time episode 9 comes around, they're going to be much more open about all the new elements of the story, and that we will get a really comprehensive documentary looking at everything and really examining the new characters and their journeys, because that's what I feel we haven't got so far. Like, so I do think this documentary is fantastic for what it is. It's just that because the focus was so overwhelmingly on Luke and Mark, like, I did feel it was missing some of my favourite aspects of the movie and didn't really go into some of the topics I most wanted to see explored.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get that summed up with that little bit. It's really adorable when Ryan tells Mark the title of the movie. So it's just the two of them, and he's like, "Oh, you can't tell anyone, even your wife." But it says it's The Last Jedi, and Mark's like, "Oh, wow, that means me." And it's like, yeah, it does. So, yeah, like, I've said it a million times, I really love Luke in The Last Jedi, but he's not the central character.
Yes.
And that's not even, like, from my perspective, it's just a fact. So, to your point, this documentary, while it's not really setting out to change anyone's mind and you feel how you feel, and I'm sure Ryan respects that, it is kind of like working through it a little bit by proxy with Mark's understanding of what was going on. So I would expect, like you, that by the end of episode 9, if we get something similar to this, I don't know if JJ would want to do something that as in depth, but maybe he will because it's the end of the trilogy, that we'd have something that does focus more on Rey, Kylo, Poe, Rose, Finn, so we'll see.
I think what I really want is like a no-holds-barred documentary, like 15 to 20 years from now, where it actually gets honest about stuff like what happened with Colin Trevorrow, and that sort of thing, because there's obviously no way they're going to do it that, like, in the Blu-ray for episode 9. You know, that's like a fantasy. But it's possible that when more time has passed, they will go into those kinds of more contentious subjects, and I would certainly love to see that.
It's possible. I suppose at the end of the day, it kind of depends on whether they think there's enough market interest for it. They're not going to release it unless they actually think people will pay for it.
Yeah. Oh, it's Star Wars. There's always interest.
Well, yeah, but at a certain point, it's like, if they can hide the dirty laundry, is there a reason to air it? Like, they haven't really done that so far with any of the Rogue One or Solo stuff, because the only thing we've got from Rogue One in terms of, like, the actual juicy, honest perception was that interview that Tony Gilroy did, and I'm not sure that was really approved by Lucasfilm. That's just him going out there now and being like, because he doesn't care, he's not a Star Wars fan, you know, he has no reverence for the franchise. He just wanted to make a war movie, so
yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Right, so I think we should probably move on now to just discuss some of the other aspects of the documentary. So the first thing, just to touch on really briefly, is that Ryan and Ram, so Ram Bergman, his producer, they seem like such bros. It was such a nice relationship.
It is really lovely to see. You can obviously, we know that they've worked on, I think, all of Ryan's film projects so far, maybe, at least a good few of them. So they have a really close working relationship. They just seem to know each other really well. And Ram is very much like, I'm here to support you, and I'm also here to kind of protect you from a lot of the financial concerns, because I think Rick Heinrich, when he's talking about, like, the sheer amount of sets in Ryan's script, he's like, there are a lot of them, and directors don't realize that when they're writing scripts, because that shouldn't be their concern. It's our concern to kind of figure out how to do that on the budget that we have afterwards. But they're creative, and then we're just helping them execute on their vision. And I think that's kind of how Ram sees his role too. So you get these really cute interactions between them where they're talking about, like, how many days they have left, like, just really practical concerns that Ram's then like, you don't have to worry about that. It's okay.
Yeah, it's so sweet. And I actually found the documentary did a really good job of distinguishing the role of the director from the role of the producer. Because so often that's really fuzzy, and of course it will vary depending on the project. It's not like there's a hard and fast rule in terms of who does what. But I think they clearly showed how the responsibilities were divided, at least in the case of The Last Jedi, between Ryan and Ram. And I was like, oh, that's how it works. So yeah, it was very educational for me.
Yeah, and I think Ram probably has some creative input in that Ryan might ask his opinion on things, but that's not his primary purpose. He's there to help Ryan execute the vision and keep the ball rolling with all of these different departments, because with such a huge project, you know, you see it with, like, coordinating the actors' schedules, coordinating with the creature stuff like ILM, like, everything. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would easily get overwhelming for a director, but, you know, the producer steps in, and if they're good at their job, it shouldn't be such a worry. He should be able to focus on the creative aspects.
Yeah. You know that birthday party they showed in the documentary, was that for Ryan and Ram? Was it a joint birthday party?
They had the same birthday, I think.
Yeah, like, that was so amazing. It was so beautiful seeing Ryan just gleefully go onto the bouncy castle, like the big child he is. I was like, oh, I love you, Ryan. I feel this on a deep spiritual level.
Did you see that they had Vader and Kylo Ren piñatas?
This time, actually, I think I was watching it for friends, so I wasn't able to focus as much as I liked. I noticed the Vader piñata. I did not notice the Kylo
I think
one.
they showed them in separate shots, but yeah.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. It shows the generations.
Very sweet.
I hope it doesn't mean that Ryan secretly wants to bash Kylo's head in. No.
It's obviously what they're getting at.
Yeah, that's clearly going to be how episode 9 ends.
Definitely. It's a clue.
Oh man. Tragic. Yeah, so then the next thing to talk about is, of course, there is a very large emphasis in the documentary on the creatures and the amazing work of Neil Scanlon and his team. And yeah, it's fabulous. It's such a marvellous menagerie of, like, creatures and designs. It's fantastic. Did you have a favourite design or a favourite aspect of seeing the creature shop at work in this documentary? I definitely have one, and I want to hear what yours is.
Mine has to be the Tala Siren, just because I find all of the discussion around it and the logistics so funny. And I love that scene in the actual movie, but just this documentary takes it to a whole new level, because you just have Neil Scanlon being like, look, I get it, you want to be on location, but is it really worth the extra money? And Ryan's like, yeah. Totally. Are you kidding? And then by the end, they have them actually helicoptering this. You know, remember when we were following the leaks? We'd get like that weird chicken monster because the photos.
Well, that's the thing. That's what makes it so wonderful for me. So I watch that and I just get so nostalgic for all the leaks for The Last Jedi.
For people who weren't
memories
following, and maybe you've gone back into our older episodes, I don't know, not many people would bother doing that, and I don't blame you, but when the leaks were happening, it was like, what the hell is this big lumpy mess on the island that they've bothered to helicopter in? And then there were all these rumors about, oh, Rey's gonna fight a sea monster, so maybe that's it. It like comes out onto the land and she's fighting him, and it just turned out that it was this creature that Luke was milking and drinking the milk, the coconut water. So it's a work of art, and
so
I find it just incredible. Like it's my husband's favorite part of the documentary as well. Like every time we watch it, he's like, I just can't believe that they felt the need to take this to location and have a real creature. Like they, you know, the level of detail is just amazing, and you can see Mark milking it. Obviously, it's the coconut water. I think he's explained that's what it is on Twitter, but it's white when it comes out, and they make it green in post-production, and he's drinking it and he thinks it tastes pretty good, and just the level of commitment is just amazing. I love it, and I would love to know how much it cost them, because obviously Neil is talking, he's like, you know, how can I trick Ryan into thinking he's still getting what he asked for, but in fact it doesn't quite cost that much money. But he doesn't want to cut corners here. It's very important to him that they take it and make it real. And it was all worth it.
Yeah. I found it so funny because they made a point of showing how they had the set with the burning tree, and they had scouted a location for that in Iceland. But they were like, it's too expensive, we'll do it here. And so, of course, they used Longcross, which, again, we know from the leak era, because some people broke into that set and took pictures of absolutely everything. It was hilarious.
And then there were theories about how Kylo was going to burn the tree.
Yeah, exactly. So there was all kinds of stuff going on. But yeah, it's so funny to me that Ryan would happily compromise on that set when that's the set for a very pivotal scene with Yoda, and like it's like a real turning point for Luke and everything. He would compromise on that. He would not compromise on the titty monster. I love it. It's beautiful.
Me too. I mean, to be fair, they only took one, and they actually CG in the rest of them, right?
I'd like to think so.
You only see one when they actually go to location, but still.
Yes.
I think their justification for having that other scene at Longcross is that it would be too much faff to get Frank Oz out there on location and then actually puppeteering for Yoda, but it's kind of weak sauce. It's like, if you really wanted to, you probably could have done it. But then maybe it is like a, you know, you have a certain amount of budget, and if you want to do this, then you can't do this. So they've just got to make it as good as they can. And that set at Longcross really is amazing too. It's not like it looks fake or anything. You know, they really did build that tree. They really did burn it down.
Yeah, no, it looked amazing.
Yeah, it's powerful watching that behind the scenes too. So
yeah, no, it looked incredible. Can I say what my favourite creature
Absolutely.
was now? It was the crystal fox, when it was an actual dog in the costume.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
And it was just running around all like, woof, woof, I'm a dog, I don't know what I'm doing, woof, woof, woof.
Yeah.
It was so amazing.
I do love those foxes. They're so elegant and beautiful and so perfect for that landscape. Like, I love The Force Awakens, don't get me wrong, and I know we've got this theme lately of like choosing between them, but I'm so much more impressed with the creature work for The Last Jedi. And I think Neil said like it's bigger than Rogue One and Force Awakens put together. So Ryan must be an animal lover, because they have so many different kinds of creatures, and they really feed into the different plots of the movie, and like they're important to the characters. Like Rose seeing and riding a Favia is important, and we know from extra material that Paige desperately wanted to see a Favia in person as well, and the planet they come from doesn't have any wildlife on it, so they dreamed of seeing animals, and they hadn't seen any until they joined the Resistance. So obviously you have to read the extra material to get that, but even just seeing Rose's reaction, like, it's clear that she adores them.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. Didn't Ryan say he loved Pokemon?
Did he? Like,
I think
in
so.
the documentary?
No, not in the documentary, but at some point, like, maybe it was one of the actors, I don't know. But Pokemon in relation to Star Wars was brought up. Because seriously, some of the creatures, especially those crystal foxes, are basically Pokemon.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, you could catch that thing in a Pokeball.
Aren't they called Vulpix? Isn't that pretty close to Vulpix?
Yeah, exactly. Vulpix, like, is even more cute, I must say. Like, if you don't know Pokemon, Vulpix is, like, red, and there's these adorable ribbons of hair, and these big glassy eyes that just look the cutest, so Vulpix is awesome. But the Vulpix also great. It's just slightly, like, fiercer looking.
Mm-hmm.
It's more badass.
And, of course, the Porgs. Like,
yes, of course.
Towards the end, they show Daisy filming on location the part where she goes and retrieves the saber after Luke's thrown it. So she's like on that cliff edge, and they brought in the Porgs to interact with the saber before she grabs it and they fly away.
Yeah.
And it's just really cute to see the Porg puppets on location.
Oh, it is. They were adorable. And I also love seeing those, like, big dudes in their green, like, latex costumes, like, puppeteering.
That was some of my favourite stuff for The Force Awakens behind the scenes, actually, seeing them running behind BB-8.
Oh, it must be so weird to watch when you're that person, though, like, watching the movie in that particular scene where you know you were running.
Yeah, it's like, there's me. I'm just edited out.
Yeah, I'm literally invisible.
Amazing.
Oh my god, it's wonderful. Right, I think we should probably move on to the Rey and Kylo stuff in the documentary. This isn't like a huge focus because obviously, yeah, Luke is the primary focus, but there is some incredible behind the scenes material.
Yeah, and there's an extra little segment called, I think it's called Balance of the Force. So it's separate from this documentary,
that's right.
But it's another feature on the Blu-ray. I didn't have time to rewatch that for this, but that focuses on that a little bit more. And obviously the Luke stuff as well, him explaining what the Force is to Rey and her sensing it. But yeah, you're right that it's not like a key component of this documentary.
Yeah, it's still a very beautiful and important component to me, though. Seriously, like, seeing Ryan and Ram, like, gush so much of Adam and Kylo is so awesome. Like, am I right to think that in the documentary, Ryan says at one point that Kylo was the character he was most excited about working on?
Yeah, I've got the quote here, and it's over Adam working on the scenes. He says, "Kylo, that was the character that I was most excited to get into and writing. Vader was a great villain, but he was never someone you identified with. Whereas with Kylo, it's almost like Rey and Kylo are two halves of the protagonist. If this is all about the transition between adolescence and adulthood, Kylo represents that anger." And then he also describes them as two halves of this whole. He says that over the finger-touching scene.
Yeah. He says that over and over again at every opportunity he gets, not just in this documentary, just in interviews generally about the movie, and I appreciate it so much. Mm-hmm. Can you remember the first time, like, he made a comment to that effect? I think we all lost our minds.
I think the entire fandom lost its mind because I think some people ran with it and thought that he was saying, oh, well, if Rey and Kylo are the protagonists and Finn isn't, which is obviously not true. They're just in different plots.
Yes.
Yeah, and this idea that, yeah, guess what? The son of Han and Leia and the grandson of Darth Vader is important to the Skywalker saga. Who would have thought?
Shock.
Yeah. But yeah, this idea of them being two halves of a whole, like, it's hard to avoid what that suggests. But yeah. So, like you say, it's really cute to see them. Like, I think the first time they talk about Adam and Kylo in the documentary, like, you see him filming a scene, I think it's the first Force Bond one, and then Ram is like, oh, when Adam's here, he's so intense. And Ryan's just like, yeah, he's intense, isn't he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they also made a very deliberate choice to never show Adam break character. Like, you never really see Adam in that documentary, like, just having a laugh and chilling with people. You know, they always just show, like, alternate angles of scenes that he's recording.
I think the only time you really see him, and he's still, like, preparing for the scene, is at the throne room when he's, like, bouncing up and down to stay energized, I guess.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, there is a really charming behind-the-scenes shot of him, like, that's not in this documentary, it's in another behind-the-scenes thing, where he's in the cockpit of his TIE fighter and he's just like smiling this really goofy, un-Kylo-like grin.
Mm-hmm.
That is the cutest. Sorry, I sound like such a fan.
No, I treasure that because so far it's the closest we have to a Kylo Ren smile, so...
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's Ben Solo and he's so happy. Yeah, no, so it's lovely. And there's also a really great quote from Daisy where she talks about what goes on with Rey and Kylo in the movie. It's only when they touch that either of them actually see what could be, and through that, they build this kind of incredible intimacy. Luke should be the one nurturing Rey, and it's actually Kylo that is. And yeah, like, I love that quote again. It's so good, and it gets to the heart of it, I think. And yeah, you kind of see Rey going through this accelerated process of growing up over the course of The Last Jedi. It's like she goes from child to woman in the space of 48 hours, because of course that's like movie logic, that's how these things work. Because she goes from like trusting in her father figure to do everything for her and to come in and save the day, and then she moves from that to trusting in a peer, like who seems so powerful and so alluring and so attractive, even though he's a bit mysterious and a bit dangerous and frightening. Of course, I'm talking about Kylo. And then she realises that he can't do everything she wants him to either, and so she ends up relying on herself. And yeah, it's just such an interesting progression.
Yeah, it's like she gets her heart broken over and over again by these different figures in her life that play very different roles, and by the end she's like, okay, I can only really depend on myself. Obviously she's reunited with her friends, and we'll see that dynamic more at the beginning of episode 9 presumably, but it is different. Like, the story is about her being let down by these male figures, and then it's very feminist really, isn't it? Yeah, because it's not saying that she's weak or naive for trusting in these people, but the way that she interacts with them and the way they can't quite be what she needs them to be is it's empowering by the end, even as heartbreaking as it is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like it's saying that those relationships weren't worth pursuing or that there was no value in them. It's just saying that she wanted things from them that they couldn't give.
Right. Like, just, you know, you're talking about like her growth being accelerated. You get it very quickly shown through the obvious symbolism of things like her hair coming down while she's in the cave and stuff like that, and the touching of the fingers. Obviously Ryan's spoken before about what that represents, but Daisy talking here too, that she's, you know, reaching out and they're building this intimacy, and the place that she expected to get that nurturing, which is a very tender, positive word to use, she actually gets it from Kylo before he stomps on her heart and ruins everything.
In terms of being an asshole, it's so sad. I'm sorry to go from a high tone to a low one, but I just want to say that behind the scenes shot of Adam Driver's chest is just pretty awe-inspiring.
It's huge. The way that they film it, because it's almost a comedic effect when she turns around and it's like skin. Like, just that angle is very like, oh, hello, here I am.
Yeah, it literally just fills the entire frame, and it's like, wow. And it's like, I know people go on about the high-waisted trousers and the fact that they look a bit silly, but I could swear that if he wasn't wearing the high-waisted trousers, it would just be obscene.
Pretty much. I mean, there are shots of him in Girls that are basically the same, where he just like opens a door and he's there, but he's just wearing like underpants, and yeah, it's too much.
I'm pretty sure there's shots of him in Girls where he's not wearing that.
Sure, but I mean like specifically where it's like panning down his chest and he's like, oh, hello. It's like, it's too much.
Bless him, he's such a trooper.
And the shot, very important, when you first see him and it's him from the back and that person is like spraying his hair.
Yes.
We're actually seeing his hair being done. It's important.
Yeah, and he looks just so thoughtful and reflective, even as the hairspray is being put on. It's kind of like he's thinking, I wonder what Kylo would feel in this moment. How would Kylo feel about hairspray? Like, what sort of philosophical positions does Kylo Ren have on hairspray?
Well, because the way it's positioned, I don't know if it's actually going into this chronologically, but it looks like that's just before the scene where he goes to see Rey as she's arriving in the coffin. So he's like walking through the aisle of stormtroopers.
Yes.
And then there's so much great stuff as well about Daisy and what an amazing performance she gives. because you know, after the proposal scene in the throne room, she's obviously very emotional and she has to go to that difficult place herself. So even after they cut, kind of like how we were talking about with Mark earlier, she takes a while to get, you know, to recover from that scene because it's emotionally intense. And Ryan says, like, you're amazing, and she, you know, she's still crying and looks like sad because it takes a lot out of her. And she really did give an amazing performance. And I think at the end, Ram says to her, like, you should be very proud of yourself because you're unbelievable. Yeah, no, it's really impressive. I remember one particular part of the documentary where, like, Ryan goes up to Daisy and he's basically saying that he thinks she's doing a great job, but he's, like, asking her to be more internal and, like, trying to express things in her face more. And I was thinking, like, God, people really don't rate actors enough, you know, like, when that's, like, what they're being asked to do, because, like, I have almost no consciousness, like, of what my face is doing in any given moment, if that makes sense. You know, whereas, like, an actor, you need to think about, like, the muscles in your face and how you're expressing those, like, internal thoughts and feelings that aren't actually, like, yours, they're your characters, but you need to make them as real as possible, which includes making them physical. And yeah, it just filled me with admiration, really. Yeah, I mean, you basically need to live it, and that's why it takes them a while to come out. Like, if you're going from, like, a Stanislavski approach, you actually have to identify with what the character's going through, right? And that can be really hard, because Rey's arc is so intense, and by the end of the story, it takes her so much strength to reject Kylo's offer because it's so badly what she wants to belong, and she really saw this future with him, and now she has to carve out her own way. And I think the last scene that they showed Daisy filming was when she was in the Falcon at the end with Chewie. I've seen a lot of criticism, and I think we might have mentioned this in our discussion of Rey's arc, that at the end it's kind of jarring for people to see her back in this, oh, I'm so happy and I'm shooting the Falcon, but that to me is just a way of Rey trying to cope with the absolute heartbreak she's gone through. So it must have been a strange note to end the filming on, but it's kind of what Rey has to do to survive. Yeah, it's like a coping mechanism as much as anything. Yeah, I think we should move on from Rey and Kylo soon, but before you do, I just need to bring up how they show the behind the scenes of that awful, heartbreaking, wonderful scene where Kylo is basically asking Rey to rule alongside him, and, like, he does the whole begging thing, and it's just subtly different takes, but you get Adam Driver as Kylo Ren saying please twice, and I can't even attempt to do what he does with it, but it just shatters my heart every time I hear it. Yeah, I'm wondering with that whether it's like two different takes of him saying please, or if they had a version where he said it repeatedly. Oh that God. Well, I don't know. I mean, I love the take they went for, so it's, you know, no skin off my nose, but it is like more intense because the way he says it is like, it is a little more beseeching. Yeah. No, it's very beseeching, and he just sounds so lost. You know, I kind of, obviously I know I'm like ridiculously overreading this, it's kind of my job at this point. But he's sort of like, I get the vibe from him where he feels like he doesn't know what he's going to do if Rey doesn't say yes. And so that's why he's so desperate and why he's so insistent and why he repeats it. Because if she doesn't say yes, he's just like nothing. You know, he has no steer left. And I think that's actually what you see, to be honest, in the movie after she does reject him. Because he's just kind of like lashing out. Oh yeah, he had no plan. He had no plan B. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why he blames it on Rey when Hux asks like that she killed him, because he was like, oh, I didn't see any of this coming. And from his perspective, he's laying it all out, but we know he hasn't. He actually could have phrased things a lot better, but didn't, because he didn't quite want to say how he felt. Or at least that's how it seems to me. So we'll see if that comes up again in 9, because there is a major miscommunication going on between them there about what they both want and think that they should have. So yeah, exactly, it's so heartbreaking. And I love seeing Ryan's reaction as they're filming it. He like puts his hands together and he's like, oh, it's like it's very like, oh, this is a very important moment. It's like, oh.
Yeah, and also it was adorable that Ryan went up to Daisy after the scene and like comforted her because you could see how cut up she was.
Exactly.
And, yeah, it was really well done. Right, then to sadly extract ourselves from all the Raylo goodness in the documentary, there is a wonderful little moment at one of the meetings where Ryan is talking about the tweets he's been getting from Russian accounts begging him not to kill General Hux.
This is one of my favourite moments because it's kind of Ryan like first getting acquainted with the weirdness of fandom.
Yes, I love it so much because to you and me, we look at that and it's pretty obvious to us that those are probably Kylux accounts.
Yeah, they're real people and he thinks they're bots.
Yeah.
He's like, why would anyone be a General Hux fan account?
Oh my god. I bet he knows so much more about Kylux and all the Star Wars ships, to be honest, than he ever wanted to know.
Yeah. Yeah, there are people out there who Hux is their favourite character and they don't want him to die because, what does he says? Like, that he has a lovely personality.
Yes.
It's amazing.
He's a real charmer. Well, they got their wish though, so I'm very happy for people.
I think my favourite thing about it actually is that, well, aside from that hilarity, that it like makes it clear that at this point, when people had like first seen or heard of General Hux, Ryan had already written his script, you know, like it was already done. Everything was decided.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of reaction of like, oh, he changed things to subvert people's expectations after The Force Awakens. He didn't. Everything was already written. So
yeah,
it's kind of a good reminder of that.
Exactly. Yeah, and also just one other thing to mention, I didn't see any behind the scenes of Donal at all.
Oh, yeah.
Not even behind the scenes of
Oh
Hux
no,
filming.
that's not true. There's a bit where Adam is shooting the Kylo more on Crate, and you see Donal's reaction.
Oh, okay, right. I missed that. I obviously wasn't paying enough attention to that part. I need to go back.
But yeah, I think
It's a good thing.
I think that's about it. So it is very little.
Yeah. No, it's a greatest hits sort of compilation.
Yeah, so let's move on to talking about like the Canto Bight subplot, because there's so much in the documentary about how hard Michael Kaplan, and I can't remember the name of the hairdresser guy, but he's in there too.
Oh god, yeah, that guy had the most amazing facial hair I've ever
awesome.
seen. The makeup guy, right?
Yeah, and he was talking about how
I wrote down his name. Oh, I found it. Peter Swords King.
Right, that's a great name. Because
that is an amazing
He was
name.
also talking about how they spent like 5 or 6 months deciding what Kylo's scar was going to look like as well. So just to get an idea of like the level of effort and intensity, and you see all of these amazing outfits and the hair and the makeup they did for Canto Bight, and then so much of it didn't actually make its way into the movie. Obviously you get a sense for it, and you get these like pans around as they like kind of build up the world, but you can see from the deleted scenes there are huge extended moments, even with Warwick Davis's alien in that spa scene as well, and it's just such a shame. I'm glad that we see it here, and you understand why that a lot of that Canto Bight stuff was cut, but it's like, oh wow, look at all this work they put in. And even after Michael Kaplan had all these reservations about like a casino in Star Wars, that sounds really weird. It's just like kind of a shame that it didn't work out. And then when we're looking at some of the Canto Bight footage, we did actually get some extra details that kind of fit into things we know from the novelization. Like Finn goes up to one of the tables at the casino and says, "Oh, I wish Rey could see this."
Yes, I loved seeing that. I also loved the part where you see Ryan discussing how there was going to be this reveal moment for Rose, where she starts off in the jumpsuit, but then she gets a really beautiful like evening gown, like to blend in with the Canto Bight crowd. Like the aesthetic person in me who loves beautiful dresses and would love to see Kelly in a gorgeous gown really misses that. But at the same time, I can kind of recognise that it's a big like cliche, you know? So I understand why they might have moved away from that, but I think a part of me wants it still, you know?
Yeah, it's complicated because I appreciate a lot of the subversion they did with Rose and Finn's like romantic elements, but that would have been like a clear signal to people to like see Finn's reaction to her changing into something. I think he describes Ryan when he's talking to Michael Kaplan that Rose would have first appear in this unflattering jumpsuit, and then I think in the Art of the Last Jedi book they say that they changed it to that like the First Order officer uniform would be her reveal because it's form-fitting and she does look really good in it. And like Finn's kind of playing with her hair in that deleted scene, so you get a bit more intimacy between them at that point. But it would have just been a bit more broadcasting to the audience that there was like this romantic thing building up between them before they kiss at the end, obviously. So
yeah,
oh well.
like I definitely would have liked to see some of those behind the scenes moments from the Star Destroyer built up more. But yeah, you're right in that you can kind of understand why they were cut out, but it's still a shame.
Yeah, so it's cool to get that stuff here, and you get more of like these amazing like slow motion shots of Finn and Phasma as they fight, and just like the incredible intensity on John's face because it's so much effort. You can see how hard he's working, and to hold his own against Gwendolyn Christie, who's this like statuesque goddess, is just, it's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome. Like, they clearly put a lot of effort into epicifying that scene. So it's a bit like the throne room scene, well, and it makes sense, obviously, from a world building point of view, because they're both in the Star Destroyer. Oh, no, wait, that's not actually true, because one of them happens after the other. Let me rephrase that. Yeah, you can tell it's made really epic, and it reminds me a lot of the presentation of the throne room scene with Rey and Kylo, because in both scenes you have all these sparks and fires, like, raging in the background. And I guess that makes sense because I think they're alluding to the whole theme they have of, and this will be the spark that ignites the fire that burns down the First Order, that sort of thing. And I think you see visual manifestations of that in both fight scenes, which, yeah, I appreciate. There's lots of awesome thematic stuff going on.
Yeah, and I just love hearing Ryan talk about Rose and Kelly by extension, because obviously she's his OC. Like, that's the new character that he created for this story and obviously felt was very important to Finn's arc. And how he's talking about her like, this is the person that I would have been friends with in high school. It's not who you expect to see in a Star Wars movie, because we watch her become the hero over the course of the movie. And I think he really understands why she would be important to a lot of people. So just I could listen to him talk about Rose and Kelly all day.
Yeah, no, you can tell how much he cares about her and cares about the character. So yeah, I really appreciated seeing those parts. Right, then just to close, I think the natural end point is to talk about that beautiful, beautiful reunion scene between Luke and Leia, because in the documentary they show a take of that scene that I honestly think is even better than the take they included in the movie. Like, especially Carrie's acting in it. It's just, wow. She really, like, gave it everything. I think it just felt so raw and vulnerable in just such a real way. I think it ties back a bit to what we were saying earlier about how I think, like, Mark and Carrie kind of drew from, like, aspects that they felt very much as themselves, as real people, you know? Like, relating the characters' experiences to their own experiences. Because, yeah, I don't think you can go to those places without doing that to some degree.
Yeah, there's something about... I think it's really wonderful that we get these different versions of the same scenes through documentaries like this, because it does somehow add to the poignancy to see it delivered in these different, like, very slightly different ways. It's quite subtle, but you can kind of see the different emphasis on the words and how it might reflect something different from the actors. Like Mark's version of "No one's ever really gone there" really sticks with me. He just emphasizes it in a slightly different way, and it just kind of hits you when you're looking at these actors who've known each other for so long and really do feel like family. It really lends this extra weight, and I think Ryan speaks earlier on in the documentary that obviously they didn't know what was going to happen with Carrie, so it wasn't intended as a goodbye. But I'm so glad that we have these scenes. Because the acting is incredible, and I think it was important for a lot of fans to see that. Like, we didn't get the same level of reunion in The Force Awakens. We got Han and Leia, but to see Luke and Leia is really special.
Yeah, no, it was really beautiful. It also reminded me, I don't think that they really go into this in the documentary, but we know that Carrie, like, worked on the script a bit with Ryan, don't we?
I think there's a little bit here when he says... Oh, they say something about the hair, like he changed her hair. He likes it. I think that was Carrie's contribution to the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's really nice, and I think that adds to that personal touch that you get from it.
Yeah. It just kind of makes you sad all over again that Carrie's not going to be around for 9. So obviously we know that she's going to be in the movie technically now, but I think Mark's even said, like, I'm not shooting the movie with her, it's the first one I've done without her, so...
Yeah, of course. I expect it must be very hard if, like, any of the actors do have to have scenes with Leia in episode 9. Like, that's going to be quite an emotional experience for them, I expect, having to, like, act off whatever they're using to construct a performance for Leia in episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, like, I'm sure everyone will be very professional about it, and it will all be discussed a lot, so...
Yeah, and at the end of that scene as well, at the end of that take, you see Ryan comforting Carrie as well, so... Again, it's showing that he really cares about the emotional places that he takes these actors, and really wants to reassure them that they're doing an amazing job. So
yeah, no, he just seems like a lovely, lovely man, because I think historically there's been this like image of the director as a bit of a tyrant, you know, someone who pushes his actors to these really like tough, challenging places, like deliberately because he wants a certain type of performance from them. You know, you read all those famous stories about Kubrick bullying Shelley Duvall on the set of The Shining, and I think Ryan is really the opposite of that now. He's just really compassionate and he really cares about the people he's working with, and yeah, the documentary went to great lengths to show that, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, exactly. You can get people to these dark places while being supportive, and that can be helpful. You know, you're talking them through it. You're explaining, this is what I wanted from this character arc, and here's how he got to this point, and here's where he's going to go next. You can do that in a positive, encouraging way.
Exactly. Yeah. No, so overall, just an awesome documentary. I very much doubt anyone listening to this will have not seen it, but on the off chance that you haven't, obviously do make sure you watch it, because it's 100% worth your time. Yeah,
and it gets me even more excited about what we're going to see from Ryan in terms of future Star Wars work. He is a gift.
He is. He's wonderful. And he just has such a great approach to filmmaking and character and writing. I just love the craft that he has going on. It's great.
Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll get a similar style of documentary for 9, or even longer and more out there, because they'll have nothing left to hide at that point.
Yeah. Oh, please. Please.
Come on, JJ.
Right. So I think we should probably tie it up here. So I think we have places to be. So I'm Rachel. You can find me at Star Wars Nonsense on Tumblr and at Journal of the Star Wars on WordPress. Where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm Bastila Bay on Tumblr and Scavengers Horde on Twitter.
Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, bye!
Bye!